Welcome to The Process with me, your host, Adam Summer.
Welcome into episode 5 of The Process with me, Adam Summer, your host. Good to be back with you. Thanks for joining me for another episode of The Process. As we get going here, I realized that I probably need to make sure that it's very clear, and I may put a disclaimer on every show. I will put a disclaimer on every show, but for those of you who are new to me, new to my shows, my name is Adam Summer. I'm an attorney in Missouri, and I want to be clear that this show is not personal legal advice. So just understand that part of it, that I will be talking about legal issues. I'll be talking about my take on legal issues and talking about my educational side on the legal issues. But just make sure that you understand that distinction, that this is not a place to come and get advice as to how to conduct your personal day-to-day business from a legal standpoint. So anyway, with that out of the way, welcome in again to episode 5 of The Process. I'm going to be talking about kind of the week. It's sort of unavoidable at this point to talk about the national side of things with Trump, whether you're talking about the plane crashes, the trade wars. There's a lot to unpack, and there's a lot going on. And so I'm going to touch on some of those things. I'm not going to go super deep on all of that, just touching on it. It's stuff that I'm sure a lot of you are seeing anyway, probably not telling you something you don't know, but just try to give some context on some of that stuff. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about Missouri and Missouri Amendment 3 that passed, the abortion amendment, and kind of just a little bit of an update if you're not following along with that too closely, because, there's a million things to follow in terms of where that is. And then I have one of my monologues, one of my, sort of thought-sharing experiments, I guess, whatever you want to call it, to do there. So that's what's going on this show. Thanks for being here. Next week is the Super Bowl. The Chiefs are in the Super Bowl. I told you last show that if they made the Super Bowl, I probably wouldn't have a show for that Monday, and that's most likely that's going to be true. If I do one, it'll be short, and I'll record it sometime this week. If something strikes me from an inspiration standpoint, then I'll put something down, but otherwise, plan on next week. I probably won't have a show, and then I'll come back after that. If you see one the Monday after the Super Bowl, then, surprise. But otherwise, just plan on that. If you like these shows, if you want to support the work that I'm doing, go to Patreon. You can look up The Process on Patreon, patreon.com/The Process. If you're a Patreon member already, you can just search for The Process, and you'll find the logos and, my smiling face, so you'll know you're in the right place. And you can toss a couple bucks over there. $5 a month is kind of the standard membership over there that I've set up. And I super appreciate everybody who has done that. And I know, some folks, maybe you're still listening. Maybe you're popping in and out, and you used to be a, Heartland pod head, and, you've changed that membership or you've canceled that membership. Also, totally cool. Anybody who can support, awesome. If you listen and you can't put money on it, also awesome. The money just goes to basically making this something that it covers the cost of me doing this. So that's really the point of the money, and I really appreciate those of you who can support it. And with that, let's get into the show. So watching news stories pop up this week, and I say that because I'm not watching the news. I don't find there's any super useful merit in cable news at this point, regardless of what channel you're watching. It's all just sort of the same outrage. It's either somebody telling you not to worry or somebody telling you that your house is currently on fire, and neither are particularly useful because it's not really giving a ton of information. But you can find the information. It's out there. It's mostly in writing. That's where the good stuff typically is going to be found. And as news stories were popping up this week, I couldn't help but sort of think about this very particular language. So, I'm an attorney in Missouri, and one of the things that I do each year is we get a new rule book. Each year we get an updated rule book with all the changes, and the rules are the Supreme Court rules. So some of the rules are about like how you're supposed to behave as an attorney in terms of like conflict of interest with clients and money, and how to run, ethically run a law practice. And some of the rules are about when things get filed, right? How courts are supposed to work. How does the criminal procedure work? How does the municipal procedure work? How does the civil procedure work in the court? Rules about child support and forms and different calculations. So it's a super useful book. And at the beginning of it is a part that is the preamble. And the preamble includes a paragraph And I'm going to read part of that paragraph. It says, as a public citizen, a lawyer should seek improvement of the law, access to the legal system, the administration of justice, and the quality of service rendered by the legal profession. As a member of a learned profession, a lawyer should cultivate knowledge of the law beyond its use for clients, employ that knowledge in reform of the law, and work to strengthen legal education. In addition, a lawyer should further the public's understanding of and confidence in the rule of law and the justice system, because legal institutions in a constitutional democracy depend on popular participation and support to maintain their authority. A lawyer should be mindful of deficiencies in the administration of justice and the fact that the poor, and sometimes persons who are not poor, cannot afford adequate legal assistance. All lawyers, therefore, should devote professional time and resources to use civic influence to ensure equal access to our system of justice for all those who, because of economic or social barriers, cannot afford to secure adequate legal counsel. A lawyer should aid the profession in pursuing these objectives and should help the bar regulate itself in the public interest. The public interest. It's an important part of what we do as a profession, and it's why I do these shows. Flat out. It's why I started doing these shows and why I come to you now. That's the point, right? It's about public interest. It's about making sure that people understand what's going on. It's about making sure that there's context for folks and trying to be a good public citizen. And it's why it is so ridiculous when you see something like a plane and a helicopter crash, and then the President of the United States go and say that DEI is the cause of a horrific, tragic event. Not just because it's demonstrably false, because it's disgusting and devalues the lives that are lost. You want to talk about a public citizen? About the president. It's absolutely abhorrent. And that's just one of the things from this past week that matters. But the helicopter crash, the plane crash, right, that was just one. There were multiple incidents this week. There are FAA issues this week. And what we're being told by the federal government, by the leaders, is that the problem is diversity, equity, and inclusion. The problem is not that we don't have enough air traffic controllers. The problem isn't that we don't have the bodies doing the job. The problem isn't that deregulation causes danger. The problem is diversity. It's equity and inclusion. They're just such bad things. At least they are if the only talent you've ever had is being born a certain race, a certain gender, at a certain time. And then we pivot to the thing that's going to impact the lives of basically every American. Don't worry, if you're extremely rich, if you have, let's say, more than $1 million in liquidity right now, meaning money that you could literally spend, more than $1 million, this trade war is not going to matter to you. If you don't, if you were like most everybody else, if you were like me and most of the people listening to this show, Trump's tariffs, the Trump tariffs, and that's what they are. They are the Trump tariffs. He needs to own them. They are going to be bad. I'm not an economist. I'm not an expert on trade. But it takes very little understanding to know that it's going to be bad. Within moments of Trump beginning the trade war, Canada announces retaliatory tariffs. Mexico starts talking about it. China stands there, ready to be their buddy. We're talking about oil and gas. We're talking about parts. We're talking about vehicle manufacturing. Ford, GM, Chrysler. A ton of goods. And parts of goods. That's part of it too that people, maybe folks don't quite understand about manufacturing, is that there may be something that gets assembled, right, in Tennessee. But the parts for the thing that get assembled come from all over the place. In fact, I did research once in undergrad for a sociology class, and I was talking about looking at Toyota versus Ford F-150s, Toyota Tundra. And did you know the Toyota Tundra, at least at that time, it was the most American-made truck on the market. It's crazy, right? But that's the truth. That's the way that it was. So we have all of these components that come from these different factories, some from Mexico and some from Canada. And we also have important things that come from Canada. If you're in the Midwest, a lot of what you put into your vehicle probably has to do with Canadian oil. There's a good chance that it does. The tariffs are going to cause a problem. Remember during COVID when suddenly there were no avocados? That was just because of global shipping issues. Now what we're talking about is a tariff on avocados. It's a tariff on everything. According to the NPR article that's linked in the show notes, Mexico supplies more than a quarter, 25%, more than 25% of the fresh fruits and vegetables in the United States. I can imagine a lot of the Republican-leaning social media moms really being upset when they can't get strawberries and raspberries and avocados and grapes, or when they can get them, but now the grapes, instead of $1.99 or $2.99 a pound, they're $5.99 a pound, $6.99 a pound. When the strawberries are $8 for a container instead of $4. Raspberries were already $12 a container in my mind. They're already insanely expensive. So, but you get the point, right? Everything's going to get more expensive. Day-to-day stuff is going to get more expensive. We have been living in this crazy bubble where in the middle of January, when it's an ice storm outside, you can go to the store and buy strawberries, a fruit that in the United States, in the Midwest in the United States, are ripe for like a week in June. Maybe a couple of weeks, depending, planted at different times and growing at different times. But there's like a little strawberry window. And if you've ever had them, and some of you maybe haven't, I'll bet a lot of you have. And you know what I'm talking about. The real deal, right? A real strawberry that got picked right off the vine, that when you bite into it is the same color on the inside as it is on the outside, right? Not like the ones at the store that are white inside. They have like this tasteless core to them. There's very few things in the world like a plump, fresh strawberry. And we've been living in a society for a long time where you can get those in January. Not as good, but you can get them. And they're not that expensive, all things considered. That's going to change. That's going to change. And people are going to notice it. Period. They're going to notice it. Along with that, on Drudge Report, by the way, great place to go. Great place to go. Aggregating headlines like crazy. From the New York Times, FAA's main warning system for pilots is down. They were using a backup system. This came out February 2nd, overnight, late Saturday night, early Sunday morning. From the story by Mike Ives in the New York Times, the primary NOTAM system is experiencing a temporary outage, but there's currently no impact to the national airspace system because a backup system is in place. Sounds like our government right now. The backup system is in place. Don't worry, everything's fine, except there's been 4 incidents of air traffic issues in the last week. They fired the chief of the federal consumer watchdog. There's chaos with student loans going on. And most of you listening probably don't even need me to say it, but it is all across the board the Project 2025 playbook. It's exactly the thing that Trump said he'd never seen it. But even if he had seen it, he didn't like it. He's doing all of it. Their playbook was 180 days. We're 30 days in, not even from inauguration. We're 30 days into the year. We're 2 weeks in from inauguration. This is what it's going to be like for the next 6 months. Hit after hit after hit after hit after hit. Change after change after change. And for every one of them that makes some amount of sense, letting, say, farmers be more in control of small farms instead of forcing certain USDA compliances on smaller farms, that makes sense. Talk to a small farmer. Ask them about the USDA. See how they feel about it. They don't like it. I promise you that. And it's not that they don't want to have safe food. It's that there's a difference between the amount of food being created in large scales and small farming. They're just not the same kind of practice. There are good changes that can be made by looking at government regulations and saying, are we using too big of a hammer for this? Right? Are we using a sledgehammer to kill a fly on the wall? Because you can get the fly, but now you got a hole in the wall that you got to work with. It's good to use the right tool for the right job. That's great. I'm all for that. We should always look at the things that we're doing and ask, why are we doing it this way? Can it be better? That's smart. That's just the way it ought to be done. But that's not what's happening. Instead, everybody right now in the Trump administration is just walking around with a sledgehammer going, fly! That's what's going on. Now we'll see if the folks who wanted Trump back enjoy the impact, because it will continue and it will only get worse. So find your people, start small, build up locally, get a group, okay? It's not that hard. You can make small committees with a small amount of money. You can request public documents. You can hire lawyers. You can get 10, 15 people together, and if everybody puts a small amount of money in the hat, you can have committees. You can get a bank account. You can start moving the needle on things. You can do that. You don't need the party. You don't need a Democratic Party representative. You don't have to join the Democratic Party to do it. That's a different thing. That's a political apparatus. You can be concerned about your neighbors and your neighborhood and your town and your county without a political party. All right, shifting gears to Missouri. Missouri Amendment 3 passed pretty easily. And where are we now? So the law that went into place in June 2022 is Section 188.017 RSMO, which is Right to Life of the Unborn Children Act, limitation on abortions. And basically it sets out that you cannot perform abortions in the state of Missouri. People would say, no, that's not the case, but that's what it says. And it was a trigger law, right? So Part 4.1 of that law says the United States Supreme Court has overruled in whole or in part Roe v. Wade, restoring or granting to the state of Missouri the authority to regulate abortion to the extent set forth in this section. That as a result, it's reasonably probable that this section would be upheld by the court as constitutional. Well, now with Missouri's constitution changing, that of course changes. So that 188.017 is essentially an unconstitutional law at this point. Attorney General Bailey has admitted as much on the record. There are nuances there in terms of the breadth of what that means. But what it means is that at some point in time, the status of abortion access, the status of reproductive rights access in Missouri will change. There was a December court ruling in Missouri out of Kansas City that the abortion ban is unenforceable under the new constitutional amendment. So that was back in December. That was Judge Zhang issued an injunctive order blocking the abortion law. And then there was then a follow-up, and this actually came out on February 1st in a spore from Missouri Independent. And again, if you're in Missouri and you want to really follow everything, Missouri Independent's the place to be. Planned Parenthood asked judge to block remaining Missouri abortion regulations. 2 months after the vote-approved constitutional amendment legalized abortion went into effect, the procedure remains inaccessible. On Friday, a Jackson County judge heard arguments over whether to grant an injunction requested by Planned Parenthood that would permit the organization to offer abortion services almost immediately. So this is on the heels of Judge Zhang's order from earlier. And so that's what's happening right now. So I would suggest you're going to see something this week. By the time you're listening to this, it may, the ruling could be out. But that is what's happening in Missouri right now. It's in the court system. It's moving forward. Meanwhile, Republicans are proposing constitutional amendments to overturn Amendment 3 because they do not respect you or me or anybody else in the state that isn't themselves and their little group. It is a small group. They are insulated. They have money. They have backers. And they really don't give a shit about your opinion. They just don't. So they'll keep going down this path. And that's the thing. That's another thing is get over the outrage factor. Get over it. Move past it. These people are the way that they are. Stop being surprised. Stop wondering why. Stop expecting them to change. Tigers don't change their stripes. Okay? These people are not changing on this issue. Shaming them isn't going to work. Reposting the things that they say and saying, how dare they, isn't going to work. They like it. They like it. They're a pig rolling in the mud. When you get down in the mud and wrestle with them, they like it. It doesn't make them upset. It doesn't make them reevaluate the way that they're doing things. They don't think twice about what they're going to say. They just fight harder. They love it. They love the mud. Get out of the mud. A great piece, again, on Missouri Independent. It's a commentary piece. It's called A Wicked Reckoning in Missouri Progressive Politics by Manya Lee Gilmore and Erica A. Christensen. Super smart piece. And if anybody knows them, I would love to talk with them. I'll try to reach out myself. But it's a super smart piece, and it's through the lens of Wicked. They came out recently, and so it's a worthy read. It's linked in the show notes as well. But the bottom line, and they kind of, they get into it in the piece is, you have to really just be realistic about what's going on. One of the lines in the piece, in Missouri, we have seen anti-abortion legislators use every tool at their disposal to police and punish pregnancy, so we can be sure they will continue to exploit the gaping loopholes in Amendment 3 allows for them. Very well said. All right. I now have my, I used to do an opening statement. I think I'm going to shift it and we'll call it a closing argument. And that'll wrap up the show. So here is my closing argument titled, We Like Freedom. Masks equal making my choice for me. Yeah, I'm taking it back to masks a little bit. Why? Because it is a small prophylactic measure, and it's not too much to ask. Especially if you do the work in your brain and you take yourself all the way back to that time when we didn't really know what was going on. We knew something was going on. We didn't know at that point that we would be in the middle of a major global death event. The kind of international illness the likes of which hadn't been seen for 100 years. Putting on a mask was a small thing. It was easy to do. Also, personally, best cold and flu season I ever had in my life wearing that thing. But we also added things, right? We added social distancing. And what we didn't realize immediately was that while masks would be a huge fight, that it might seem okay to wear a mask if not forced closures and the 6 feet apart and all of the other little ticky-tacky stuff. Right? It became like a test. Like, do you know the 10 rules of how to interact with COVID? Am I saying that we got all the policies wrong? No, I'm not. Because, again, nobody knew, right? We just didn't know. And so there was a lot of best guesses, right? We think this will be the best way to handle it. And sometimes that's all you can do. So I'm not saying that the COVID policies were wrong. In fact, a lot of them were clearly right. I'm just saying it's okay to look back. It's wise to look back and be honest about how people reacted to this required level of conformity. And for anyone who wants to jump up and say, well, you just don't care about the vulnerable, you're flat out wrong. This past week, we had to spend quite a bit of time, and she's still struggling with my own daughter. For those of you who are newer listeners, or maybe you've never listened, or maybe you haven't caught it. I have a daughter. She's 7 right now, and she's extremely special needs. And for her, COVID, we believed would be a death sentence. We took it extremely seriously. We took every precaution. We were serious. We were safe. We were masked. We were vaxxed as soon as we could. We did social distancing, and you know what? It sucked. But for us, for our family, for our situation, it was right. For some, it was harder. What I'm saying is that folks who sometimes yell the loudest about being considerate of others and being empathetic also seem to have a very hard time applying that standard during a time of global uncertainty and fear. I'm self-employed in an industry that did well during COVID once courts reopened. Heck, the 6 weeks that we spent without in-person contact with clients and courts was like the best 6 weeks of work in my professional life. I was more productive than ever before. My wife is an educator. She didn't miss a paycheck. We live in an area where our kids could easily go outside and see people while being safe. We have a playground in our yard. We were incredibly privileged. That wasn't the case for everyone. So for some, COVID meant Tiger King and getting booze delivered to your door and learning to make sourdough, which I did, and it was amazing, and I got pretty good at it. Once a friend pointed me in the right direction. You use parchment paper? Man, it makes a huge difference if you use parchment paper in the process. While I was admiring the unbelievable flavor that a toasted fresh sourdough makes as it caramelizes, and it is absolutely amazing. A little bit of peanut butter on a toasted piece of fresh sourdough. I mean, it's hard to beat. But during that same time, there were men and women just hoping to go back to work. People making hard decisions. In some places, shelves were empty. For some, they never stopped going to work. They couldn't. Remember the stories about the meat packing plants where managers were taking bets on how many workers would die? Add to that the manipulation of information and pre-existing healthy distrust of government. And it's pretty easy to see how anger and distrust can be sown and start to take root, which then is allowed to grow. And what you hope is that it will be met with something that stems it, that cuts it down. Instead, what it got was fertilizer. Trump, after championing vaccinations, went all in on disinformation and the politics of COVID backlash. MAGA, RFK Jr., a lot of guys my age and just a bit older also doing podcasts. It was like Miracle Grow into fertile soil. It's not hard to convince a person who's been required to take their temperature to eat dinner that freedom is being limited. But here's the thing. Most of that pales in comparison to the genuine threat of control the modern push for theocratic control brings. It's why I am focused on the issue of freedom, real freedom, freedom of conscience, freedom of thought, association, speech, assembly, and of the press. It is hard to understate the importance placed on freedoms, including and flowing from the First Amendment, often noted for its preferred place as the first and specifically enumerated rights enshrined in the Constitution. And it's an easy way to compare and contrast in conversation. You didn't like the way COVID restricted your freedom? Then why do you favor the same kind of restrictions based on personal belief? It's a worthy question, and one we should all carry with us at the ready. Thanks for joining me on this episode of The Process. Again, if you like what I'm doing, you can go to Patreon/The Process and support me over there financially. You can also like and subscribe. Like this podcast wherever you're listening to it. Give it a 5-star rating if you can. Leave a review. Helps other people find us. Make sure you subscribe and take a moment to share it with somebody that you know that you think, hey, you might want to check this out. In the meantime, I hope everybody has a great, great week. Go Chiefs. Let's get that three-peat. Let's get that done. For those of you who are not Chiefs fans, I do not care. I'm very sorry. I have no empathy for you. Go Chiefs. Go three-peat. Everybody have a great week. Stay safe. Stay healthy. And in the meantime, be well.
The process is made possible by listener support through Patreon. Go to patreon.com/theprocess or search The Process on Patreon. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you for those of you who support me through Patreon to help me make this content and continue making it as long as possible. Enjoy American Aquarium and World on Fire.
TV, trying to find some meaning, hoping that we'd wake up from this dream sometime tomorrow. Well, the night came and went, not a damn thing had changed. That's when I saw a tear fall from her eyes. She said, what are we gonna do? What's this world coming to? For the first time in my whole life, I stood there speechless. The load is heavy and the road is long, and we've only begun to fight. We just can't give in. We just can't give up. become the home of the afraid. Afraid of the world, afraid of the truth, afraid of each other. This ain't the country my grandfather fought for, but I still see the hate he fought against. Give rest to the tired, give mercy to the poor, give warmth to the huddled masses, and I'll show you freedom. The load is heavy and the road is long, and we've only begun the fight. We just can't give in, we just can't give up. We must go boldly into the darkness and be the light. I got a baby girl coming in the spring. I worry about the world she's coming into, but she'll have my fight, she'll have her mama's fire. If anyone builds a wall in her journey, baby, bust right through.